In the 1500s, a young woman was captured from her small village. She began a long journey over land and sea. Many days later, she arrived in the capital city of the huge Ottoman Empire. This woman would be known by many names. Europeans called her Roxelana, which means the maiden from Ruthenia. But her Ottoman name was Hurrem. In Persian, this means joyful or laughing. In this podcast, we will call her Roxelana, a name many people know her by. Her story has captured historians' attention again and again. Why, you ask? Because this maiden from Ruthenia would become the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire. She became the wife of the Sultan. This is the story of Roxelana, the unlikely queen of an empire.
Hi, young historians. Welcome to another episode of Anytime Now. I'm Brooke, co-founder of Honest History. In today's episode, we're going to learn about a woman who used a tragic situation to make a big difference. Instead of keeping her power and wealth to herself, Roxelana used her influence to make the world a better place and improve the lives of those less fortunate. So sit back, relax, and get ready for this amazing journey back to the Ottoman Empire.
Our story begins around 1520. Roxelana stood in front of the old palace in Istanbul. Her reddish hair shined brightly in the sun. She was in a strange and unfamiliar land, the capital city of the Ottoman Empire. This city was filled with people from around the world, with many different religions and languages. It was very different from her home. Roxelana had grown up in Ruthenia. At that time, it was part of the Kingdom of Poland. Today, Ruthenia is in modern-day Ukraine. While Roxelana was growing up, her homeland was often attacked by Tatar soldiers. These soldiers arrived in the freezing winter, raiding villages. They captured men, women, and children. These people were forced to march to the Black Sea by foot. There, they were loaded onto ships to begin their new lives in a different land. They were sailing to Istanbul. This had been Roxelana's fate. It was a wonder she survived the long journey from her home to Istanbul. After marching to the Black Sea, she had spent 10 long days aboard a ship. Like so many others, she arrived in Istanbul as a prisoner. Her new life would be the Ottoman Empire, and she would serve its ruler, the Sultan. Roxelana looked around at her new home, the old palace. It sat in the middle of Istanbul, but it was different from the rest of the city. Most of Istanbul was bustling with activity, but here, where Roxelana stood, all was quiet. The palace was surrounded by a huge stone wall. She looked up and saw a double watchtower in the distance. It almost looked like a fortress, but it didn't feel like one. All around the building, Roxelana saw green gardens and lawns. This was a royal palace. This is where the women and the children of the Sultan's family lived. Roxelana stepped inside the palace and looked around her. It was beautiful and so different from her home in Ruthenia. She had a lot to learn about her new life. Intelligence, more than anything else, would help her get ahead. Historians still aren't sure how Roxelana arrived at the old palace. Was she a gift for the Sultan? Or was she just another servant working at the palace? If she began as a palace servant, Roxelana may have spent her time heating up water for baths, serving food, and cleaning. Later on, when she'd proven herself, she may have been given more important tasks, like dressing and entertaining the Sultan's family. Soon after arriving, Roxelana converted to Islam. Islam was the religion of the Sultan and his family. It was important that she also learn Turkish, the language of her new home. She quickly made a good impression on the people in the palace. She was given a new Ottoman name, Hurrem. In Persian, this means joyful or laughing. Roxelana was known for her cheerful spirit. The older women in the palace guided Roxelana as she got used to her new life. They taught her how to speak, read, sew, embroider, play the harp, and sing. Roxelana also learned about the different ceremonies and traditions of Ottoman culture, and there were many. Whose hand should she kiss as a sign of respect? Who was she allowed to speak to? And what was she allowed to say? These are all things she needed to learn. The palace had many rules and many intimidating women. One of these women was Sultan Süleyman's mother, Hafsa. She was the queen mother and the most powerful woman of the old palace. While Hafsa was alive, no woman could rise above her. Sultan Süleyman would come to the old palace to visit his mother Hafsa and get her advice. The Sultan and the men in his family lived in another palace, called the New Palace. Süleyman's visits were an opportunity for Roxelana to meet the Sultan. It was not long before she caught his attention. Roxelana began making many journeys to New Palace, where Süleyman lived. Back then, there was a constant flow of people traveling between the old and new palaces. There were messengers, princes, officials, and servants. Some walked, some rode horses, and others, like Roxelana, arrived by carriage. Roxelana remembered the first time she made the trip to the New Palace. That day, Roxelana stepped into a carriage that was covered with curtains. The carriage began its journey. It passed through the old palace gates and turned onto the street. Roxelana peered out from behind the curtains and saw a huge mosque with magnificent domes and towering minarets. Next to it, there was a covered market filled with people selling food and goods. The carriage passed the Hagia Sophia, a Christian church that had been converted into a grand mosque. Soon after, Roxelana looked out and saw a huge stone wall. It was the outer wall of the New Palace. The entrance was guarded by a group of soldiers. These were Janissaries, the Sultan's army. The carriage rolled through the gates and traveled a bit further, passing beautiful lawns and gardens. Finally, Roxelana reached the palace doors, the home of the Sultan. Little did she know that this would eventually become her home too. It did not take long for Roxelana to become Süleyman's favorite. He called her by her Ottoman name, Hürrem, but soon everyone else knew her as Hasiki. In Persian, Hasiki means favorite. The two bonded over poetry, something they both enjoyed, and soon they fell in love. Even today, the love between Roxelana and Süleyman lives on in the poems they wrote to each other.
My springtime, my merry-faced love,
Süleyman wrote to Roxelana.
My daytime, my sweetheart, laughing leaf.
As Hasiki, Roxelana jumped to a much higher position, one that many women in the old palace envied. But it was also a very fragile position. At any moment, she may no longer be the Sultan's favorite. Although she enjoyed a comfortable life in the palace, it is important to remember that she was still enslaved. She did not have her own freedom. Roxelana could be sold and taken away at any moment. Roxelana had learned about the different traditions of the Ottoman Empire. By now, she knew there was only one way to keep her high position, to make sure she stayed in the palace, and that was to have a son.
Hi, young historians! Time for a quick break from this amazing story to tell you a bit more about Honest History. If you're enjoying this episode, then you'll love Honest History's magazines and books. Each one is filled with important adventures through the past, like the story of Chen Yisao, a Chinese woman who commanded one of the largest pirate fleets in history, to Mansa Musa from Africa, one of the wealthiest people to ever live. You can pick up a copy or subscribe and receive 3 issues delivered straight to your doorstep every 3 months. Just go to honesthistory.co and use code ANYTIMENOW for a 10% discount. That's honesthistory.co and special promo code ANYTIMENOW. Okay, let's get back to the story.
As luck would have it, Roxelana gave birth to a baby boy named Mehmed. The sound of cannons could be heard throughout Istanbul to announce the good news. Roxelana and Süleyman had a son. After Mehmed was born, Roxelana gained more rights. According to Ottoman custom, she could no longer be sold or given away. Süleyman and Roxelana would have 4 more sons and a daughter named Mirhama. It became clear to everyone that the relationship between Süleyman and Roxelana was unlike any other. Even more so, when the two broke Ottoman tradition. Around 1533, they became husband and wife, and Roxelana was given free status. It was not often that a sultan married a servant of the palace. It surprised people around the world. What did this mean? Was Roxelana now the queen of the Ottoman Empire?
This week there has occurred in this city a most extraordinary event, one absolutely unprecedented in the history of the sultans,
one European visitor said. The wedding celebration was held in the old hippodrome of Istanbul. In ancient times, this area was used for chariot racing and announcing new emperors. Süleyman used the hippodrome for huge festivals. During the wedding celebration, Roxelana and the other women of the court were partly hidden behind a golden screen. They watched knights battle each other, jugglers toss items up into the air, and a parade of animals. Giraffes towered over the spectators. For many, they had never seen anything like it before. The rest of the city celebrated alongside the royal couple. At night, the streets of Istanbul were filled with light and music. Everywhere you looked, houses were decorated with garlands. As the wife of the Sultan, Roxelana now had a unique position. She was the unofficial queen of the empire, and a powerful queen she would become. Roxelana became Süleyman's trusted advisor and friend. She also helped keep her husband informed about life in Istanbul. This was important because the Süleyman was often away from home on military campaigns. "My dearest Sultan," Roxelana wrote, "if you ask about Istanbul, the city still suffers from the plague. However, it is not like the previous one." As queen, Roxelana had the wealth of an empire at her disposal. She used some of this money to fund buildings. Her first project was the Haseki complex in Istanbul, and she had 2 talented architects to design it. One of these architects would be remembered as the greatest architect in history. His name was Mimar Sinan. Roxelana explained the project to the architects, and they began drawing up plans. The complex would have a Friday mosque, a soup kitchen, schools, and a hospital. Next, Roxelana needed to decide where to build the complex. The architects visited different parts of the city looking for potential locations. Finally, a site was chosen: the Avrat Pazar neighborhood. This neighborhood was home to the women's marketplace, a place where women were allowed to have shops and sell their goods. This was exactly where Roxelana wanted her complex. Finally, in 1538, building began. The neighborhood became a center of activity. Laborers, artisans, and engineers all arrived, grateful for work. New shops began sprouting up around the complex. The weekly women's market was bustling with activity as more and more people arrived in the neighborhood. All in all, the complex was great for business. By 1541, the complex was almost complete. Only the hospital was left to build. Roxelana arrived in her curtained carriage and looked out at the scene in front of her. There, on top of the mosque, sat a large dome, and to the side, a towering minaret. Behind the mosque, there were many more buildings, all decorated with domes. Roxelana was excited to get people into the schools and the soup kitchen. Under her orders, the people who worked at the complex had to be kind and of good character. The school teachers needed to treat their students like they were their own children. The soup kitchen would feed the poor, students from the schools, patients from the hospital, doctors, teachers, and administrators. Soon, The complex was a buzz of activity. During the day, you could often hear children singing during their lessons. The Haseki complex was the first of many works Roxelana commissioned. During her life, she helped build new mosques, schools, soup kitchens, public baths, shrines, hostels, and hospitals. Many of these were built to serve those in need. Yet, Roxelana's life was not without controversy. Her rise to power made many uncomfortable. Throughout her life and for years to come, people criticized the unofficial queen. Some described her as cold-hearted. Others said she was dangerous. Historians would blame Roxelana for the death of the Sultan's most trusted advisor. In truth, we may never know the full story. Much of Roxelana's life is still shrouded in mystery. However, this queen would leave behind an important legacy. One of these was a legacy of strong women. Roxelana's daughter, Mirhama, would fund many beautiful buildings that still stand today. Like her mother, Mirhama had the support of the Sultan Süleyman, and with that, great influence in the empire. Roxelana passed away in 1558 at around the age of 55. Today, her tomb can be found in the Süleymaniye Mosque complex in Istanbul, right next to the tomb of her husband, Sultan Süleyman. Roxelana's story continues to capture people's attention. She would be known by many names: Roxelana, Harem, and Haseki. Each name tells a different part of her story. She was taken from her homeland in Ruthenia and enslaved under the Ottoman Empire. But she would break tradition to become the wife of the Sultan. Roxelana would become Haseki Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire.
Welcome back. Isn't it amazing when people who rise to power use their newfound influence to make an impact and truly leave their mark on the world? If you become a powerful person someday, do you think you'll be able to give back to others the same way Roxelana did? As a fun activity, take some time over the next week to write down some of the things you would do and the people you would help if you were powerful. But remember, you can make a big difference before then too. That's all for now. But if you want to learn more about another incredible woman during the Ottoman Empire, check out issue 18, A Magnificent Reign. You can learn all about Mirhama and the way she used her power to improve the lives of those around her. See you all next time. This episode was hosted by Kelly Ryan and written by Heidi Coburn. Production was led by Randall Lawrence. To learn more about this episode, including more about the host, visit us at honesthistory.co and follow along for updates on social media at Honest History.
When you think about history, are there lots of old guys wearing wigs and stockings? When you think about history, is Napoleon really short? And folks have wooden teeth. Do you know that history can be the most incredible, amazing stories for you and me? Sit back and listen to a story right now. It's honest, it's fun, and it's sure to